The rain painted silver streaks down the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan law firm, each drop racing the others like tiny tears the sky could no longer hold. Emma Whitfield stood in the marble lobby, one hand resting protectively over the curve of her stomach, the other clutching her leather portfolio as if it were a shield. 6 months pregnant, she thought, and still terrified of what the next hour would bring. Upstairs, Julian Hayes checked his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. His attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, had already spread the divorce papers across the conference table in neat, accusatory rows. Julian told himself this was just another business transaction, another contract to sign, another chapter to close. He had rehearsed his composure for weeks. He would be professional, cordial, efficient. He would not let Emma see how the past 8 months without her had hollowed him out from the inside. The elevator chimed. Julian's breath caught in his throat. Emma stepped into the conference room, and the world tilted on its axis. She wore a cream cashmere dress that draped elegantly over her frame, her chestnut hair swept back in a simple twist. But it was not her beauty that stopped Julian's heart. It was the unmistakable swell of her belly, the roundness that spoke of life growing, changing, becoming. His Emma was pregnant. His Emma. Except she was not his anymore, was she? That was why they were here, in this sterile room with its leather chairs and legal documents that would tear apart what they had once promised would last forever. Their eyes met across the polished wood table. Julian saw something flicker in those hazel eyes he had once known better than his own. Pain, perhaps. Or resignation. Or maybe just exhaustion from carrying the weight of secrets and new life. Patricia cleared her throat. Emma's attorney, a silver-haired man named Gordon Price, gestured to the chair opposite Julian. Emma moved with careful grace, lowering herself into the seat. Julian watched her hand smooth over her stomach, an unconscious gesture of protection that made something inside him crack wide open. Patricia began with the standard opening, her voice professional and detached. But Julian heard nothing. His entire focus had narrowed to the woman sitting across from him, to the impossible reality taking shape before his eyes. Finally, he found his voice. It came out rough, barely above a whisper. When? Emma knew what he was asking. She had known this moment would come the second she decided to show up today instead of handling everything through attorneys. 5 months along, she said quietly. Almost 6. Julian's mind raced backward, calculating, remembering. That meant it happened before she left. Before everything fell apart. Before he had watched her walk out of their penthouse with 2 suitcases and eyes that would not cry, would not give him even that small piece of her pain. Is it mine? The question escaped before he could stop it, and he hated himself for asking, for the doubt that flickered even as he knew the answer in his bones. Something shifted in Emma's expression. Not anger, but something colder. Something that looked like disappointment. Yes, Julian. He is yours. He. A son. Julian gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white against the dark wood. He had a son. They had created a child together, and he had not known. Had not been there. Had not even suspected. Why did you not tell me? His voice cracked on the last word, betraying the careful composure he had spent weeks building. Emma looked down at her hands, folded over her belly. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but Julian could hear the tremor underneath, the fault line of emotion she was fighting to contain. Because you were never there, Julian. Not really. Not when it mattered. The words hit him like physical blows. He wanted to protest, to defend himself, to explain that he had been building their future, securing their life, making sure they would never want for anything. But the excuses died on his tongue because somewhere deep inside, in the part of himself he had been avoiding for months, he knew she was right. Patricia and Gordon exchanged glances. This was not going according to plan. Divorces were supposed to be clean, clinical, a division of assets and a signature on a line. They were not supposed to be about unborn children and the wreckage of love that still smoldered in the ashes. Perhaps we should take a moment, Gordon suggested gently. But Emma shook her head. No. Let's get this done. She reached for the papers, her hand steady even as Julian's world collapsed around him. He watched her fingers hover over the first page, pen poised to sign away their marriage, their history, their everything. And suddenly, with a clarity that felt like waking from a nightmare, Julian understood what he was about to lose. Not just Emma. Not just the past. But the future. A future with a son who would grow up without him. A future where he remained the man who chose everything else over the people who needed him most. Wait. The word came out strangled, desperate. Emma, please. Just wait. She looked up, and in her eyes, he saw the question that would determine everything. The question that asked if he finally understood. If he was finally ready to be present for something more important than the next deal, the next meeting, the next triumph that meant nothing without someone to share it with. Julian stood, his chair scraping against the floor. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know I destroyed what we had. But that's my son, Emma. Our son. And I'm begging you. Don't sign those papers yet. The rain continued its relentless descent outside. Inside, in that quiet room where futures hung in the balance, Emma studied the face of the man she had once loved with her whole heart. And Julian held his breath, waiting for a verdict he knew he did not deserve. They met on a night when champagne bubbles caught the light like captured stars. The Metropolitan Museum of Art had transformed into a wonderland for its annual charity gala, and Emma Whitfield moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her emerald gown trailing whispers of silk against marble floors. She was there for her gallery, networking with collectors who treated art like commodities and beauty like an investment portfolio. Julian Hayes arrived late, tie already loosened, phone pressed to his ear even as he climbed the museum steps. His tech company had just closed a funding round that made headlines, and everyone wanted a piece of his attention, his time, his vision for the future. He had not wanted to come at all, but his father insisted that connections mattered as much as innovation. Their collision was almost cinematic. Emma turned from a conversation with a sculptor, wine glass in hand, just as Julian stepped backward to avoid a waiter. The red wine arced through the air in slow motion, splashing across the front of his crisp white shirt. "Oh my God," Emma gasped, hands flying to her mouth. "I am so sorry." Julian looked down at the spreading crimson stain, then up at the woman whose cheeks had flushed the same shade as the wine. And he laughed. Actually laughed, something he had not done genuinely in months. "Well, I guess that's one way to make an impression." She grabbed napkins from a passing waiter, dabbing ineffectively at his shirt, which only made things worse. "I'm making it worse. I'm so sorry. I can pay for the dry cleaning. Or replace it. Do you know what brand it is? I can find out." "It's just a shirt," Julian said, catching her hand mid-dab. The touch sent electricity up his arm. "I'm Julian." "Emma." Her smile was sunlight breaking through clouds. "And I promise I'm not usually this destructive." "Shame," he said, surprising himself. "I was hoping you made a habit of assaulting strangers at charity events." They talked for 3 hours, tucked away in a corner near the Egyptian wing, forgetting the gala, the networking, the reasons they had come. Emma told him about her gallery in Chelsea, how she believed art could change lives if people just stopped treating it like wallpaper. Julian told her about his company, but more importantly, about the kid from Boston who built computers in his garage because creating something from nothing felt like magic. When the gala ended, Julian did not want the night to. "Coffee?" he asked, though it was nearly midnight. "At this hour?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "I know a place. 24 hours. Best pancakes in the city." She should have said no. Should have gone home, maintained professional boundaries, protected the careful life she had built. Instead, she said, only if you promise not to wear white. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony in Central Park, just 50 guests and vows they wrote themselves. Julian promised to build a life with her, not just a fortune. Emma promised to remind him what mattered when the world tried to pull him in 1,000 directions. They honeymooned in Santorini, spending lazy days in a villa overlooking the Aegean, making love and plans and promises about the future they would create together. For a while, it was perfect. Julian came home for dinner. They cooked together, dancing in the kitchen to old jazz records. Weekends were sacred, phones off, just the two of them exploring the city like tourists in their own life. Emma opened a second gallery location. Julian's company expanded. They talked about babies, about buying a house upstate, about growing old together. But success has gravity. It pulls, insistent and relentless. The change was gradual, almost invisible at first. One late night at the office became 2, then 3. Important meetings started bleeding into dinner reservations. Julian brought his laptop to bed, blue light illuminating his face while Emma lay in the darkness beside him, feeling the distance grow in inches and silences. "I need you here," Emma said one morning over coffee, her hand reaching across the breakfast table. "I am here," Julian replied without looking up from his email. "No," she said softly. "You're not." But he was building something, he told himself. He was securing their future, making sure they would never struggle, never want for anything. He did not see that what Emma wanted was already slipping through his fingers. Their second anniversary arrived on a Tuesday. Emma made reservations at the restaurant where they had eaten breakfast after the gala, the place with the best pancakes in the city. She wore the emerald dress, had her hair done, spent an hour on makeup that looked effortless. She waited at the table for 90 minutes, smiling apologetically at the waiter who kept refilling her water glass, checking her phone for messages that never came. Julian arrived home at 2 in the morning to find Emma sitting in the dark living room, still in the dress, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Investors from Singapore," he explained, exhaustion making his words slur. "Emergency video call. I texted you." "You texted me at 9:30 that you would be late," Emma said, her voice hollow. "Our reservation was at 7. "It's just dinner, Em. We can go another night." "It was our anniversary, Julian." He rubbed his face, too tired for this conversation. "You're being dramatic. It's one dinner." Emma stood slowly, carefully, as if movement required concentration. "When did I become an obligation?" she asked. "When did loving me become something you fit in between meetings? That's not fair." "No," she agreed. "What's not fair is being married to someone who is never actually present. What's not fair is feeling lonelier with you than I ever felt alone." Julian wanted to argue, to defend himself, to make her understand the pressure he was under. But his phone buzzed with another email, and his eyes flickered to it automatically. Just for a second. Less than a heartbeat. But Emma saw. And something in her expression closed, like a door locking from the inside. 3 months later, she left. No fight, no ultimatum, no dramatic scene. Julian came home one evening to find half the closet empty and a note on the kitchen counter. "I love you enough to let you go chase what you love more than me. I hope it makes you happy." He told himself she would come back. That she was being emotional, irrational, that she would realize he had done everything for them. He buried himself deeper in work, closed bigger deals, made more money, proved to the empty penthouse that he was successful, accomplished, worth something. But at night, in the vast bed that suddenly felt like an ocean, Julian lay awake and finally heard the silence. The absence of her breathing beside him, her morning laughter, her voice calling him back to the things that mattered. He had built an empire, but he had lost his home. And now, 8 months later, sitting in a lawyer's office with divorce papers between them and a child growing in Emma's belly, Julian finally understood the cost of his choices. He had not lost Emma in a single moment of betrayal or catastrophic mistake. He had lost her in 1,000 small absences, in every time he chose something else, in every moment he forgot that love requires presence. The question now was whether understanding came too late, or if somewhere in the wreckage of what they had been, there remained a foundation strong enough to build something new. The silence in the conference room stretched like pulled taffy, sweet and painful at once. Emma's pen still hovered over the divorce papers, her hand trembling so slightly that only someone who had once memorized every detail of her would notice. Julian stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs like a prisoner demanding release. "Sit down, Julian," Emma finally said, her voice carrying a weariness that made him ache. "You're making everyone uncomfortable." He sat, but his eyes never left her face. Patricia and Gordon exchanged glances that spoke of billable hours stretching into uncertain territory. This was not how these things typically went. "When I left," Emma began, setting down the pen and folding her hands over her stomach in that protective gesture that Julian was beginning to recognize, "I thought the hardest part would be walking out the door. But it wasn't. The hardest part was the week after, when I kept reaching for my phone to text you about something funny I saw, or when I made coffee and automatically poured 2 cups. She paused, swallowing hard. "The hardest part was realizing that I had become so accustomed to your absence that your actual absence barely felt different." Julian felt each word like a blade, precise and true. "Emma, Let me finish," she said gently but firmly. "I moved to a small town in Connecticut. Rented a cottage near the water. Started teaching art classes to kids at the community center. And for the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to breathe without waiting for disappointment." She looked directly at him now, and he saw tears gathering in her eyes like morning dew. "Then I found out I was pregnant." Julian's hands clenched into fists on the table, not from anger but from the desperate need to reach across the space between them and hold her, comfort her, be there in a way he had failed to be before. "I was terrified," Emma continued, a single tear escaping down her cheek. "Because I knew I would love this baby with everything in me, and I was afraid. Afraid that if I told you, you would make promises you could not keep. Afraid that our son would grow up watching his father choose everything else, just like I did. Afraid that loving you again would destroy me." "I would never hurt him," Julian said, his voice breaking on the words. "Emma, I swear to you, I would never make our son feel the way I made you feel. But don't you see?" Emma's voice rose, emotion finally cracking through her careful control. "You didn't mean to hurt me either. You thought you were doing the right thing. You thought providing was the same as being present. You thought success would make up for all the moments you missed." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so vulnerable it made Julian's chest tighten. "How do I know this time is different? How do I know you won't miss his first steps because of a meeting, or his first words because of a conference call, or his first day of school because some deal is more important?" The question hung in the air like smoke, and Julian realized that this was the moment. Not the signing of papers or the negotiation of custody. This was the moment that would determine whether he truly understood what he had lost and what he still had a chance to save. He took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice was steady with a certainty he had never felt about anything in his entire career. "You can't know. And I can't prove it to you with words because I already broke every promise I made." He leaned forward, hands spread on the table between them. "But Emma, when you left, something inside me shattered. I kept going to work, kept taking meetings, kept doing everything I thought defined who I was. And I was empty. Completely hollow. I had everything I thought I wanted, and it meant nothing." Patricia shifted uncomfortably, but Julian did not care. This was not about the divorce anymore. This was about the rest of his life. "I started seeing a therapist," he admitted, watching surprise flicker across Emma's face. "Dr. Reynolds on 68th Street. Twice a week for the past 5 months. She asked me in our first session what I was running from, and I told her I was not running from anything. I was running towards success. He laughed bitterly. She said that people who are running towards something don't leave everything important behind. Emma's hand moved unconsciously to her belly again, and Julian saw the way her expression softened almost imperceptibly. She was right, he continued. My father built his company from nothing, worked 18-hour days, missed my childhood because he was too busy securing our future. And I swore I would never be like him. But somewhere along the way, I became exactly what I feared. I became the man who measures worth in deals closed and revenue generated instead of in moments shared and love given. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather journal, worn at the edges. After you left, I started writing. Every night before bed, I wrote down one moment from our marriage that I should have been present for but wasn't. One moment I chose wrong. He opened the journal, pages filled with his handwriting. There are 243 entries. 243 times I failed you. Failed us. Emma stared at the journal, lips parted in shock. Julian. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me, he said quickly. I'm telling you because I finally understand that awareness is not the same as change, and change is not the same as transformation. I can tell you I've changed. I can promise I'll be different. But the only way you'll ever believe me is if I prove it, day after day, moment after moment, choice after choice. He closed the journal and set it on the table between them. So I'm asking you not to believe me. I'm asking you to let me show you. Don't sign these papers yet. Not because I think we can go back to what we were, but because our son deserves a father who is present. Who shows up. Who chooses him first, every single time. Emma was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face as she struggled to process everything he was saying. Gordon quietly pushed a box of tissues across the table, his own eyes suspiciously bright. I'm scared, Emma whispered. I'm so scared of letting you back in and having you leave again. I can't survive that twice, Julian. I won't. Then don't let me all the way in, Julian said, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. Keep your walls up. Keep your distance. Keep everything exactly as guarded as you need to feel safe. But let me meet him. Let me be there when he's born. Let me hold my son and tell him that his father is going to spend the rest of his life learning to be the man worthy of being called Dad. The rain outside had stopped, and through the windows, a pale winter sun broke through the clouds, painting the room in gold. Emma looked at Julian, really looked at him, searching for something in his face. Hope, perhaps. Or proof. Or just the possibility that people could truly transform when they finally understood what they stood to lose. I moved to Fairfield, she said finally, her voice soft. There's a small house 2 blocks from the beach. Yellow shutters. Garden in the back where I want to plant tomatoes in the spring. She took a shaky breath. The nursery is the smallest bedroom, painted pale blue with stars on the ceiling that glow in the dark. Julian felt hope bloom in his chest, fragile and tentative. It sounds perfect. You can visit, Emma said, and Julian heard the weight of what those words cost her. Once a week. Saturdays. We'll have lunch, and you can see where your son will grow up. You can be part of this, Julian, but on my terms. Slow. Careful. With boundaries I need you to respect. Anything, Julian said immediately. Whatever you need. Emma looked at Gordon, then at the divorce papers spread between them. File for a postponement. 6 months. After the baby is born, we'll revisit this. She met Julian's eyes. But if you disappoint him the way you disappointed me, if you miss even one Saturday without a genuine emergency, if you make our son feel like an obligation instead of a priority, I will sign these papers so fast you won't have time to make excuses. Do you understand? I understand, Julian said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Emma stood slowly, and Julian instinctively moved to help her, his hand on her elbow as she steadied herself. For just a moment, they stood close enough that he could smell the jasmine perfume she always wore, could see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. "Don't make me regret this," she whispered. "I won't," he promised. "Not this time. Never again." She nodded, stepping back, creating distance again. But as she walked toward the door, she paused and looked back. "His name is Oliver. I was going to name him after your grandfather." The name hit Julian like a wave. Thomas. His grandfather Thomas, who had taught him to fish and told him stories and been the one steady presence in his chaotic childhood. Emma remembered. Despite everything, she remembered what mattered to him. "Thank you," he managed, voice thick with emotion. Emma's smile was small, sad, but real. "See you Saturday, Julian. Don't be late." And then she was gone, leaving Julian standing in the conference room with a postponed divorce, a second chance he did not deserve, and the absolute certainty that he would spend every remaining day of his life proving that people could change, that love could heal, and that being present was the only success that truly mattered. Outside, the sun continued to shine, burning away the last of the rain clouds. And for the first time in 8 months, Julian Hayes felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt hope.